Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit for January. In this kit there were some really beautiful papers from 49 and Market, and there were also some beautifully coordinated bow bunny papers. I'm starting off this layout with a piece of old 12 by 12 inch paper, and I'm going to mount everything on top of it. I'm using one of the bow bunny papers in the background. I cut some 3/4 inch strips and I attached 2 strips down on either side of this piece of paper, and then for the other 2 sides I cut the corners at a 45-degree angle, and then when I attach those pieces down it looks like a little frame. This is something that I like to do instead of gutting paper. There's nothing wrong with gutting paper. I do that all the time, but when I want to conserve every bit of my paper, I find that this uses a little bit less paper. So I am using ATG adhesive and I'm attaching those strips with the 45-degree angles down over the other 2 strips, and now I have my little frame. I'm going to be using one of the 49 and Market pattern papers, but I wanted to have a very thin border of white between this background and the 49 and Market paper. So I am holding it up to the frame and I'm making marks with my pencil where I would like to make the cuts, and then I use my trimmer, which I always have off camera, and I cut it down to size. Now that it's the correct size, I'm attaching it down on the background. And I like to keep a nice stash of papers that I know that I'll never use handy, and then I will often piece together other papers that I really love on top of them. I find them useful, and then I also don't have to feel guilty about getting rid of papers, especially older papers that are a very nice quality that I don't like the pattern of, but I do like the thickness of the paper. So that's one way to use your older papers. Now I'm layering that pattern paper over the top of the white paper, and you can see I'm just going to add a very, very small border. I just like the way the white separates the 2 patterns. Off to the left, you could see one of the My Creative Scrapbook cut files that are available exclusively to My Creative Scrapbook subscribers. It says the start of something amazing. I backed the cut file with some pattern paper, and then for the letters that I backed, I used some navy blue thread and I stitched around the inside of all of the openings. I didn't like the way the white looked against the pattern paper because the pattern paper is very light. So I used that same paper that I used in the background and I cut out the words the, of, and something. I'm layering them on top of the cut file. You could see here though that I'm not lining them up perfectly. I'm offsetting these words a little bit so that you could still see the white in the background, and I think that that helps the letters to be more noticeable and stand out from the layout a little bit more. I have to apologize that my head is in some parts of this video and my hair is looking atrocious. That's a whole other story for another day, but sorry about that. Now I'm using the stencil that we got in the kit this month and some Finnabair heavy gesso. I am using a natural sponge and I am dabbing the gesso through the sponge. I think that makeup sponges work really well. I would not go through the trouble of getting a natural sponge because the makeup sponges clean a little more easily and they are widely available and they're very inexpensive. But I've had this sponge for so many years that I am just used to using it, but it works no better than a makeup sponge. The stencil work doesn't end up being very prominent in the finished layout, but it does add a little something to the layout. I always think that every little thing adds something, some texture, some interest. So even though it's not very bold, I still think that it adds a little something to the layout. One of the nice things about using gesso on the background like this is that it dries super, super quickly. I didn't have to use my heat gun. The heat gun will often warp the paper a little bit, and there are ways to flatten it out, but I would just prefer not to have to worry about that step. So this is a good alternative to using a really wet mediums that are going to cause more warping. This is a photo of both of my daughters. It was taken in the theater right before a Broadway show began, and we went to see the show Kinky Boots, when it was guest starring Brendan Urie, and he is the lead singer of Panic at the Disco. I wouldn't know any of this except that my younger daughter really loves him. We had a number of experiences getting tickets through the Girl Scouts when the kids were little, and they were very inexpensive seats, but they were really, really far away from the stage. So I have since changed my way of thinking. If you're going to go to a Broadway show, I think you don't have to be the ultimate seats, but I think it's better to go to less shows and have better seats. So we got some nice seats for this particular show. We really enjoyed it. We really had a good time. And then afterwards, all of the performers came out of the back, and my daughter got the autograph of Brendan Urie and some of the other people or actors that were in the show. It was just a out and out fantastic experience. So I thought that this was just a great title for this photo. I love these title cut files. I like to take some of the elements from the kit, the die cuts, the ephemera pieces, the laser cuts, and tuck them behind the cut file. I think that it's an easy way to make a layout, and this is, for me, a very quick layout. It did come together rather quickly. The cut file stitching was the thing that took me the longest. So now I've placed a number of tickets, some branches, a key, a frame on the bottom with a sentiment in it, and a tab on top of the photo. I'm going to use that to stamp my date. And now I'm using some adhesive and I'm attaching all of those elements down to the page. I thought the long thin frame on the bottom fit nicely in that space. I wanted to back it with some pattern paper, so I used a scrap that I had. I cut it to size to place behind the frame. I chose a light section of the pattern paper so that there would be a little contrast between that pattern paper and the rest of the blue papers that were on the page. And I'm attaching a sentiment in the frame now that I'm going to later switch out for a different color. And I had not attached that tab at the top of the page down, so I added some adhesive to that as well. Now I'm taking another frame, this beautiful ornate frame, and I'm cutting it into smaller pieces. I'm using the strip at the top and the bottom, and I like the way the frame looked cut into these strips, but I ended up not really liking them where I had placed them on the layout. And I think the reason I didn't like them is because the cut file covers a lot of the page and there aren't a lot of open areas. Those are the last two open areas, and I think that it just made it look too busy. And while I like the embellishment, I think that the layout looks better without them. But I have them there for now. And now I'm adding some photo corners that I punched out of some scraps of pattern paper. I wanted to go with a light color. I think that it draws attention since the background of this photo is dark. I attach those down, and then I also put some adhesive on the cut frame piece, and now I'm just making sure that I have it centered on the layout. And even though I didn't use these pieces on this layout, I ended up using them on my layouts this month, so they did not go to waste. I had so much trouble getting that letter G to stick down. I tried several different times to put adhesive on it, but it just kept popping up. Finally, I used some wet adhesive and that worked. Now I'm switching out the sentiment that was printed on some tan paper for a sentiment that says, "Create your life." That's printed on a blue paper, and I thought that the blue paper looked better. I think that inside the frame just needed a touch of blue. Now I'm adding some die cuts to the layout. I think that these die cuts really added the finishing touch that I was looking for to the layout. I cut them out of some lightweight white cardstock, and I used two different dies. They're either berries or they're buds. I'm not really sure, but in any case, I think that this added just the right detail to the layout. And just like I did with the other embellishments, I'm tucking them all around that cut file. This is where I added the liquid glue to the G and finally got it to stick down to the layout. In addition to adding some detail to the layout, I also think that I needed a little bit more white mixed in there with all those blues. So I always love to put branches on my layout, but for this particular layout, I really felt like that addition made the whole layout kind of come together. I didn't have too many of the correct color blue pearls, so I used what I had. I had 3 of this dark blue pearl in a medium size. I didn't have a fourth one, so I covered up that fourth photo corner a little bit with one of the die cuts just because I didn't have enough to go around. And then I put some larger pearls on the top along with a very small pearl, and then I put two of the smaller pearls on the bottom on either side of the sentiment. I usually put a lot more pearls on my layouts, but this was just enough to add a little bit of a different texture to the layout. I also added 2 white pearls to the layout. I wanted to have a pearl in the lower right hand corner, and I didn't have enough of the blue ones, so I decided to add one on the bottom and then put one of the white pearls on the top cluster as well. Now I'm using gel glue and I'm gluing all of those die cut pieces down. I like to glue them at the base and underneath the cut file. I like the way it looks when the die cuts create a little shadow, and that was the last touch to the layout, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I have a lot more videos coming up, so I hope that you'll be back to the channel to check those out. Please take a look in the description box. You'll find links to the My Creative Scrapbook website and to all of their social media. I would highly recommend checking out all of their beautiful kits. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.